Hey, I'm Jan and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. I've just returned from an action-packed weekend down for Framefest in Sydney, and while I was away, a lot of things have happened, so let's get right into it. A few weeks ago, I was asked if I wanted to attend an event in Sydney called Framefest. Now, I hadn't heard of it before, but I thought, why not? It's always great to meet people in person, hopefully meet some of my followers, and see other photographers in action. And I must admit, I was not disappointed. I really had no idea what to expect, but in the end, I was very happy that I went because the event was fantastic. All the major brands were there, showcasing their gear and also offering great workshop stations where you could see other photographers in action and actually learn a lot. Besides that, there were also some fantastic presentations from creators on the main stage, like Vin Jiang from Adelaide, who told us all about his YouTube journey all the way from a crutch magician now to a communications expert with many millions of followers. And if you've never heard of him, I'll link one of his videos down there in the description. This event went on for 2 days, and what I actually liked the most is meeting so many of you guys and many other creators face to face. I'll link some other amazing creators for you down there in the description, like Matt Irvin, who even got me to model a little bit, my friend Jason Morris, who probably has the biggest arms in the creator business, and of course Julia Trotter, who takes some amazing portraits. And maybe the best part about the whole show was me scoring this pair of Nikon socks that I can wear in my reviews going forward. And of course, when you're down in Sydney, you also have to do some tourist activities like going to the Opera House and walking on the Harbour Bridge. The day I left, we almost got a new firmware for the R5 Mark II and the R1 that seemed to have some amazing and some kind of odd features. Now, I didn't bring any Canon gear with me, so I couldn't install it right away, which now in hindsight is a blessing in disguise because the firmware was pulled just hours after it was released because to some severe issues with certain memory cards. Seeing that was actually a bit disappointing to me because Canon has kind of built a reputation for stuffing up firmware releases. This happened a little while ago when the firmware for the R3 was released, and now it has happened again with the R1 and the R5 Mark II, which is definitely not a great look, and it seems like Canon needs to be a little bit more testing before releasing these firmware updates. By the sounds of it, Canon will be re-releasing this firmware later this week or early next week, but I totally understand if many of you will be quite cautious and conscious of installing this firmware update on your cameras. And it probably makes sense with most firmware updates going forward to just wait a few weeks before installing them to make sure that any of the bugs that might be in the firmware actually iron out before you put it on your own camera. Some people already reported some problems with the previous version 1.0.3, and now having some issues with the new version that was hopefully going to fix some of these issues is definitely disappointing. But I'm hoping that Canon can iron that out and we get the new firmware because it actually adds some great features to our cameras. So once the firmware is released again, hopefully this time without bugs, I will install it on one of my R5 Mark II bodies, but definitely not all of them. And then I go out and field test it for all of you guys so you don't have to guinea pig your cameras. The most exciting and useful update in this firmware is definitely the ability to now choose how many frames you want to take when you're using pre-capture. Until now, the R5 II always captured 15 extra frames and the R1 20 extra frames, which is definitely too much in most situations. So having the ability to dial that back to about 6 to 8 frames will be great going forward, because I will still not miss any moments, but also don't get too many extra images onto my memory cards that I then have to sort through during the editing process. With this update, Canon will also bring a quite odd feature to the R5 II and the R1, which is password protection. But it doesn't actually do what you think a password would do. So once you install the new firmware, the camera will prompt you to put a password in, and then it will also give you the option to either bring this up every time you start the camera, or you can click never show this again, and then your camera will work like normal again. Now you would think this could be a great thing if your camera has a password and it's kind of protected from other people using it, but it doesn't actually work that way because even if you set a password, you can still factory reset the camera and that will then also reset the password. So in the end, this password is not really there to protect your camera, but rather to protect certain network settings from being seen and being accessed by other people. So for most of us, this new password feature really doesn't make sense and just seems like an extra hassle, but at least we can click it off right after putting it in. Alongside those features, we'll also get a new autofocus mode that I wish was available for birds and animals too, but at the moment it's for sports only. And that is a mode where the camera does not recognize nets anymore. So if you're shooting like tennis or badminton or something like that, oftentimes the camera will probably get stuck on the net instead of focusing on a player, or you might be shooting through a net and then the camera will always get stuck on the net. And now with this new mode, the camera seemingly ignores the net and will always jump right onto the player, which sounds amazing, and I think is something that should also be introduced in the future for grass and branches, so we don't have to deal with that anymore when we try to focus on a bird. Besides that, I'm sure many sports and especially motorsports photographers will also be happy to see that Canon reintroduced the panning assist mode that you're used to from the R3 that makes it easier to pan in certain situations. On top of that, there's also this kind of cryptic message that it says that video autofocus has been improved when it tries to focus on difficult subjects in certain situations, which doesn't really tell us much, but if it focuses better, I'm all for it. Now, one of the major things that isn't directly addressed, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't been fixed, is any reported autofocusing issues with firmware 1.0.3 and maybe the power saving mode. Oftentimes, Canon doesn't say everything they're doing in the firmware, and they might do a little bit of a tweak here and there for something that was never officially an issue. So hopefully, once the firmware is installed, all issues are gone, because Canon also seemingly has fixed a lot of other issues that have held up the R5 Mark II in particular a little bit, with certain error messages hopefully all being gone now as well. So while we still have to wait and see how this whole firmware saga is working out, all in all, this seems like a great update with more features added to the camera than what Canon is usually doing, which I think is great to see. Even though I was quite busy, I also managed to edit a few more images from my last road trip, and the first one I wanted to share is of this male Naretha blue bonnet parrot. And what I love the most about this shot is that it just showcases all the amazing colors on this bird, and especially the different shades of blue. And I love bird portraits in particular because it often lets you appreciate their beauty in a way that's otherwise very difficult to do. And normally we are not up that close to a quite rare bird. So being able to showcase a photo like that, I think gives you great insight into that parrot and their amazing plumage. And it also goes hand in hand with a series of wider shots that I've shared with you already. In my recent R5 II versus R1 video that you should definitely check out if you haven't done so, I also talked about the reason that I often use the R5 II over the R1 in certain situations. And this Naretha blue bonnet parrot would be a perfect example for that, because this image is obviously a quite decent crop. And on the R5 Mark II, I'm still able to get a nice and decent sized file out of it, whereas on a 24 megapixel camera or less, this would be a substantial crop that is probably not usable for certain applications anymore. On the trip, we also came across another small parrot that I wanted to photograph for a long time, the tiny rock parrot. And here I edited two different versions of a similar photo. The first image is a vertical shot that I edited up for a magazine cover that is a bit more colorful. And the second image is one where I moved slightly to the left, giving me a different colored background that is a little bit more subtle in the color, making the bird more pop, but at the same time also giving me that kind of rocky, cliffy feel around that rock parrot. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you have a preference between the more colorful option 1 for the magazine or the wider kind of more subtle colored image? And of course, if you want to level up your own image editing and learn the most important tools and techniques and improve your overall workflow, I would love to help you on that journey with my next generation Photoshop and Lightroom masterclasses. In my classes, I teach you step-by-step an easy to follow workflow that will allow you to edit all your RAW files, even the most difficult ones, with great confidence and get amazing results every single time, ready to be shared with the world. And of course, you won't just be watching, because I'm also sharing my own RAW files with you so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out the amazing reviews that I receive on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives, who now get great results with ease and actually enjoy editing their own photos. So if you want to turn editing from a frustrating chore where you don't know where to start or what sliders to pull into a rewarding experience where you have an easy to follow workflow that guarantees you great results, make sure to check out my masterclasses down below, because I know they will help you a lot. When going down to Sydney, I actually decided to go 2 days early and pick up a Z8 and a 600mm PF lens and go into the field and test out the latest firmware 3.0, or actually I probably have to say 3.0.1, Because just like Canon, Nikon also had a little stuff up in their latest firmware update where the camera wasn't working properly with certain lenses, so they quickly released a new version or updated version of firmware 3.0. So if you're on a 3.0 camera, you definitely want to update to 3.0.1. So while we actually struggled to see the rare bird that we were looking for, the spotted quail thrush, we came across some other birds, and the Z8 overall performed really well with nice and snappy autofocus that stayed on my subjects most of the time. And I could also test out some of the new features like the focus limiter that I don't think I would use too much in the field, but it's definitely great to have in the camera if you want to limit your focus to a certain range, and was definitely nice and easy to work with. So overall, another great firmware update from Nikon, even further improving the Z8 and making it more usable for us photographers. On my last day in Sydney, I was walking up the harbour bridge enjoying the outlook before I had to head back to the airport, and I was actually wondering, what kind of cameras do you guys like to take with you if you're, for instance, sightseeing or just out and about on a walk or going somewhere with your family or kids? Because on this trip, I only had my Osmo Pocket with me and my phone. And normally I'm happy with this kind of setup, and oftentimes I just resort to using my phone, especially when photographing my daughter, for instance. But at other times, I wish I had a smaller, lighter camera with a couple sort of interchangeable lenses with me, because it would have been easier, especially to zoom in a bit more. And so I would just love to hear from you guys in the comments. What's your kind of go-to lightweight camera that can do it all that you have with you on a daily basis, or if you travel, for instance? Because I feel like that is something that's kind of missing in my current setup at the moment. And I actually also looked at the cameras like the Nikon ZF or ZFC, and I could almost see myself using one of those cameras, because that retro look actually kind of goes hand in hand with that kind of street style photography. So what are you guys using? Is it a Leica camera? Is it a Nikon camera, Sony, Canon? Is there something else small and light that you're using? Or are you using just your phone? Let me know in the comments. And at the end, I also wanted to share some news about the R6 Mark III with you, because it seems like the announcement date has actually moved forward. I received a phone call last week where I was told that the announcement is probably going to happen now in September, with shipping being started sort of in Q4 this year still, rather than early next year, which is definitely great. And I'm looking forward to get my hands on that camera, because if some or all of the specs we've heard so far are true, this actually sounds to be like an amazing camera. And on that note, I think it's time now to wrap up this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Give me a thumbs up for the video. Check out my channel membership and masterclasses. And of course, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.